I'm a fan of the Logos Bible software, and I've got a huge library. When I start researching, that's where I start. When Bill asked me to talk about the impact of love in evangelism, I started with a search in Logos. I was astounded to find the myriad types of evangelism that exist. Evangelism can be ministry-based, church-based, needs or problems-based, question-based, worship-based, worldview-based, and Bible or gospel-based, although I'm not sure what non-Bible-based evangelism is. Other types of evangelism are apologetics-based, fear-based, science-based, prayer-based. Several references stated that there are only two kinds of evangelism. First, there is public or mass evangelism, which would include event-based, media-based, and door-to-door evangelism. Secondly, there is personal evangelism, which is also described as friendship, testimony, or relationship-based evangelism. I also found references to John Wimber's power evangelism and Ralph Winter's 3 types of cross-cultural evangelism. But in all of my research, I found not a single reference to love-based evangelism. I did find a reference to love evangelism, which is also referred to as missionary dating. When I was a teenager, I did have a friend who told me they were dating someone in the hopes of winning them to Christ. Definitely not a recommended form of evangelism. Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 that Christ's love compels us because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. Love, Christ's love, should be the underlying motivation for all our evangelism efforts. Rebecca Pippert, in her book Stay Salt, says that the primary motivation for evangelism and discipleship is very simple. It is love. Jesus told us that his disciples would be known by the love that they had for one another. Yet this does not describe the North American church today. In his book, Letters to the Church, Francis Chan asks this question: can you name a single church in our country that is known for the way its members love one another? I'm sure you can think of churches known for excitement or powerful preaching or worship or production value. But can you name a church known for supernatural love? How did we get to a place where we lost the very thing that Jesus said we would be known for? I think this was a byproduct of the efforts of the church to fend off false doctrine. Error started to develop in the church in Paul's day. That error turned into false teaching. The church developed orthodoxy, right teaching, to counteract the false doctrine. And while there is no question this response was needful, we lost something in the process. What became of primary importance was not how you behaved. What became of primary importance was what you believed. I believe the Nicene Creed. I agree with the Apostles' Creed. They are good summations of the basic tenets of the Christian faith. But both of these documents are missing something. The word love. Love is missing from the earliest doctrinal statements of the church. Christianity went from being behavioral, we were known for our love, to being creedal. What was important was what we believed. And this remains true to this day. Belief is more important than behavior. Doctrinal purity is more important than loving one another and loving the lost. This has had a significant impact on how the church has presented the gospel. Ever since I was a kid, I was told that God saw me as a wretched sinner, worthy of death. The reason Jesus had to die was so that God would see him and not me. God can't look on us because of our sin. He can only look at us through the blood of his Son. Keith Giles suggested that much of the evangelical church believes John 3:16 different than it actually reads. For God was so filled with wrath against the world that he sent his only begotten Son to take the beating that we all deserved. That if anyone would want to escape eternal suffering and would raise their hand and repeat this prayer after me, they would escape this horrible wrath. For the Son was not sent into the world to change our minds about God, but to change God's mind about us. So now that Jesus has taken the punishment for us, God can finally love us and forgive us. But of course, that is not what John tells us. For God so loved the world. The object of God's love is people, the world, us. One of the most successful evangelists of the 19th century was D.L. Moody. While revivalists of the 18th and 19th century used descriptions of the torments of hell as a basic tool of their trade, hell was seldom mentioned in Moody's sermons. It was not because he did not believe in hell, but rather he understood that God wanted to draw people to himself by love and not attract slaves by fear. Moody had grasped that to manipulate crowds by appeals to fear was out of character with God and did not produce the results that God desired. Moody stated, "I know of no truth in the whole Bible that ought to come home to us with such power and tenderness as that of the love of God." Moody's approach was love-based evangelism. Love should be our primary motivation in evangelism, and love for the world should compel us to share the good news. Research by the Barna Group indicates that fear of giving offense or being rejected is one of the primary barriers for many Christians when it comes to talking about their faith. Fear silences them. Love and fear are opposites. John tells us that perfect love drives out fear. Why? Because love is sacrificing your interest for the good of others. Love is focused on the other person, while fear is self-focused. What will people think of me? When we love someone, we are interested in their welfare above our own. When we fear, we are generally driven by a concern of what will happen to us. The primary evidence that we love God is our love for those around us. As John tells us, if we don't love people we can see, how can we love God whom we cannot see? Sharing the gospel with those around us is a sign that we love them and that we love God. Love in our horizontal relationships is the best evidence of love in our vertical relationship. Our evangelism should be love-based. Love should color everything we do. As we read in 1 John, this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. In this world, we are like Jesus. So what does love-based evangelism look like? In their book, I Once Was Lost, What Postmodern Skeptics Taught Us About Their Path to Jesus, Don Everts and Doug Schopp found that the vast majority of people who ultimately came to faith through InterVarsity student ministry started by trusting a Christian. Trust is something that is earned. People will not generally trust you unless you show yourself to be trustworthy. Genuinely and authentically caring for the non-Christians around you and showing them honest and sincere love is probably the best way of showing you are trustworthy, worthy of their trust. If you show them love, many non-Christians will eventually move from distrust to trust, then from complacency to curiosity, from being closed to being open to change their lives, and from meandering to becoming a spiritual seeker. 1 Corinthians 8 tells us that knowledge puffs up while love builds up. If we focus on loving people, on building them up, rather than unloading our knowledge on them, we show ourselves to be worthy of their trust. 1 Corinthians 13 describes several ways that love applies to evangelism. And in particular, I love Eugene Peterson's take on 1 Corinthians 13 in the Message Bible. How does this apply to evangelism in your context? Love doesn't give up on people. Love cares more for others than for self. Love doesn't strut or have a swelled head. Love doesn't force itself on others. Love doesn't keep score of the sins of others. Love takes pleasure in the flowering of truth. Love puts up with anything. Love trusts God always. Love always looks for the best. Love's never looked back, but keeps going to the end. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. I will confess that I'm still not very good at this. I don't think others would describe me as a person known by my love for others. In fact, I can get quite unloving when confronted with incompetence, particularly in ministry. But I know love is what is required of me, and so it is one of the things that I constantly talk about. I am called to live like Jesus in this world, and that means I need to be known for the love that I have for others. I would like to leave you with this simple question. Are you living such that those around you can see God's love reflected in you?